The NFL regular season is right around the corner. With just 1 week of preseason games left, there's enough information to know who should be taken in the early rounds of fantasy football drafts. Let's take a look at the best of the best. Here are my top 30 overall rankings for fantasy football 2019. No fluff, only facts. Let's get right into it. My number one overall player in 2019 is Alvin Kamara. While he doesn't get the same total volume as McCaffrey or Barkley, Kamara does get significant volume when it matters most. Last season, Kamara was top 2 among all running backs in both carries and targets in the red zone and within the 10-yard line, and was 4th in goal line carries. This provides context for his 18 touchdowns and shows that they are not a fluke, especially when you consider the fact that the Saints have an elite offense that takes many trips down to the red zone. Kamara's receiving upside also can't be ignored, as he lined up out wide or in the slot for over 25% of his snaps last year. This shows that his 81 receptions also aren't a fluke. Latavius Murray's presence shouldn't scare anyone from drafting Kamara, as he was a top 4 running back in back-to-back seasons when Mark Ingram was still on the team. After all, Kamara's injury risk isn't as high as other workhorse running backs because of his limited touches. Kamara is better off getting the ball near the end zone and scoring, rather than getting 4-yard carries in the Saints' own territory and constantly being banged up. Lastly, the fact that Saints running backs have been either first or second in fantasy points scored in every single season since 2011 speaks for itself. Simply put, Alvin Kamara is the safest player in fantasy football this year. Christian McCaffrey is at number 2 because his receiving upside is unheard of for running backs. He got 107 receptions last year, which was first among all running backs and 8th among all players, finishing ahead of guys like Antonio Brown and Travis Kelce, all while also getting 219 carries. McCaffrey is the centerpiece of the Panthers' offense, whether they're running or passing the ball. Saquon Barkley is at number 3 on my list because, while he's obviously a phenomenal talent and was the number 1 running back last year, he finds himself in a potentially worse offensive situation with Odell gone and the rest of the Giants' receiving core in shambles. Barkley is still a top 3 pick due to his extremely high workload, big play potential, and pass-catching ability. These 3 running backs make up the top tier of players in fantasy football and all deserve consideration first overall. Next up is Davante Adams. Now, Aaron Rodgers had a down year in 2018. That didn't stop Davante Adams from being the number 1 receiver on a per-game basis in PPR while scoring at least 16 fantasy points every single week. Davante Adams is an extremely safe pick due to his high floor. DeAndre Hopkins is 5th overall due to his similarly high floor, as he also had no single-digit fantasy point games last year. Hopkins has been the number 2 receiver in each of the last 2 seasons and has had a ridiculous 35% target share in that span. This all makes Hopkins an easy pick to repeat as a top 2 WR in 2019. Next up is the hardest player for me to rank, Ezekiel Elliott. Zeke was number 1 in my top 15 RB ranks that I posted about a month ago, but I've had to make some changes since then. While both Zeke and the Cowboys are confident that a deal will get done at some point this season, the fact that nothing is done yet with the regular season about to start is concerning. It's looking increasingly likely that Zeke won't play the full season, so I can't keep him at the top. He's still worth the first-round pick, though, because both sides remain optimistic that a contract will be signed in the near future. Anyway, if you draft Zeke, then you absolutely need to draft Tony Pollard as well. Next up is none other than Dalvin Cook. It may be surprising to see Cook this high, but I've been high on him for a while. I already talked about Cook in 2 previous videos. To summarize, Dalvin Cook is looking to capitalize on the Vikings' shift to a run-heavy offense under Gary Kubiak, which is even better for Cook now that Latavius Murray isn't on the Vikings anymore. Last year, from weeks 12 to 17, Cook was the number 7 RB in fantasy while Murray was still on the team. Now, let me explain why Dalvin Cook isn't injury-prone, which many people seem to think. Cook has had over a year and a half to recover from his ACL tear, which was just a freak injury. His hamstring issues from last year can also be explained by the fact that hamstring strength is weakened by about 40% shortly after an ACL tear. Now that his hamstring has had time to fully recover and is back to normal, the training wheels are coming off of Dalvin Cook. Number 8 is Nick Chubb. Last year, from week 7 to the end of the season, Nick Chubb had the starting job in the Cleveland backfield and was the number 8 running back in fantasy football. Chubb handled 80% of the team's rushes, all while staying in the top 10 in yards per carry and yards after first contact. Now that Duke Johnson is gone, Nick Chubb has increased receiving upside as well. Kareem Hunt is also nothing to worry about because he won't see the field until Week 10 due to his suspension, and by then Chubb should already have solidified himself as the workhorse running back, while Hunt merely fills in as a change of pace back. Number 9 overall is David Johnson. If DJ was the number 9 running back last year, an improvement makes sense now that the Cardinals have Kyler Murray at quarterback and offensive-minded Cliff Kingsbury at head coach to revamp the system. DJ is my number 7 RB this year. Rounding out the top 10 is James Conner. Jalen Samuels will take away some pass-catching work from James Conner, which limits his overall upside, but 209 targets are up for grabs now that Antonio Brown and Jesse James are gone. The Steelers still have a high-powered offense, and there are enough touches to go around for everybody. Drafting Jalen Samuels is also a great idea, though, especially if you get James Conner. Another player who will benefit from over 200 targets being vacated in the Steelers' dynamic offense is Juju Smith-Schuster. He's my number 3 receiver in 2019 because he's been explosive over the past 2 years, notably finishing as the number 8 receiver last year with Antonio Brown still on the team. It's time to see what Juju can do as the main weapon in Pittsburgh's passing attack, stepping into a role that allowed AB to be the number 1 receiver in fantasy football for 4 years in a row. My number 4 receiver and number 12 overall player is Julio Jones, who has been a top 7 receiver in each of the past 5 seasons. Julio is one of the safest receivers that you can draft. It's as simple as that. Le'Veon Bell is next. We all know how talented Bell is as a player and how productive he's been in fantasy since 2014. However, he finds himself in a worse offensive situation now with the Jets, especially since Adam Gase is the head coach. Gase has limited his running backs' receiving upside in fantasy football, so it's wise not to let expectations get out of control with Bell in 2019. These next 3 players are all members of the elite Kansas City Chiefs offense. First, Damian Williams is the starting running back for the Chiefs, a team that has been 4th in running back fantasy points since Andy Reid became head coach in 2013. Williams has had massive success in his limited time as the starter, averaging 24.4 fantasy points per game last season from Week 14 to the AFC Championship game. After Williams' hamstring scare early in camp, Reid was quoted saying that a committee approach will be used this upcoming season, presumably to limit Williams' injury risk. Drafting Darwin Thompson is a great idea, but Williams has still proven himself to be the lead back this preseason. This next one is pretty easy. Travis Kelce has been the number 1 tight end in each of the last 3 seasons. Oh, and in case you forgot, Patrick Mahomes is throwing the ball to him. With the tight end position being especially thin in fantasy this year, Kelce is absolutely worth an early pick. Last up for the Chiefs is Tyreek Hill, who is also catching passes from Patrick Mahomes. Hill is arguably the top deep threat in the entire league and was last year's number 3 wideout. He's an elite option again in 2019. Next up is Michael Thomas of the New Orleans Saints. Thomas has been phenomenal since entering the league in 2017, as he has been the number 6 wide receiver in each of his 2 seasons so far. I have him lower than the consensus, though, because he somehow scored 9 or fewer fantasy points in 4 of his 16 games last season, despite leading the NFL with 125 receptions. Next up is Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is an offense that I absolutely love in 2019. With head coach Bruce Arians looking to have a pass-heavy offense with about 29% of the team's targets from last year being vacated by Deshaun Jackson and Adam Humphries leaving, Mike Evans truly has the upside to return to his top 3 receiver status from 2016. Next up is Odell Beckham, who finds himself in the promising Browns offense. Baker Mayfield is quite the upgrade over Eli Manning, so Odell absolutely has the potential to be the number 1 wide receiver in 2019. However, there's quite a bit of risk associated with Odell due to his injury history. His current hip injury doesn't seem like it'll put his Week 1 status into question, but Odell has played the full season once in his 5 years in the NFL. Rounding out the top 20 is Aaron Jones, who I talked about in depth in my last video. Jones has also been plagued by injuries in the past, which keeps me from ranking him higher, but was the number 5 running back in fantasy football from Week 8 to 14 last season when he held the starting job in the Green Bay backfield. New head coach Matt LaFleur is looking to establish the run more than Mike McCarthy did last year, along with featuring Aaron Jones as a receiver when he isn't running the ball. This all translates to an increase in touches for Aaron Jones. In his 8 games with at least 10 touches last year, Jones averaged over 19 fantasy points per game, with only 1 game under 15 fantasy points. Now that Aaron Jones is looking to lead the Packers' rushing attack in 2019, he has sky-high fantasy upside. Coming in at number 21 is Joe Mixon, who also has top 5 upside but has quite a bit of risk associated. While he was a top 10 running back last year despite missing 2 games, he finds himself in a bad offensive situation behind the 27th ranked offensive line according to Pro Football Focus. There is hope though, as new head coach Zach Taylor is looking to model the Bengals offense after the Rams playbook. Next up are 2 elite tight ends. Like I said earlier, the high-end tight ends are so valuable this year due to the position being thin. George Kittle takes the number 2 spot due to the fact that he was able to break the single-season tight end receiving yard record and lead all NFL players in yards after catch as a second-year player with backup quarterbacks throwing the ball to him. Now that Jimmy Garoppolo is back, Kittle is in a better situation and figures to be the centerpiece of the improved 49ers offense. Next, Zach Ertz has been a top 3 tight end in each of the last 2 seasons and is a member of the loaded Eagles offense led by Carson Wentz. Ertz set an all-time record for tight ends last year with 116 catches, and he's a strong option at the position yet again in 2019. Kerryon Johnson comes in at 24th overall as he is looking to capitalize on Theo Riddick's departure, although C.J. Anderson will vulture some touches from him now. Johnson was the number 14 running back last year before getting injured in Week 11, and he finds himself as the number 13 running back in my rankings. Next up is Keenan Allen, who remains Phillip Rivers' number 1 target. The Chargers may look to pass the ball even more now if Melvin Gordon fails to show up, which would give Allen a higher floor. Allen has been a top 12 wideout in back-to-back seasons and is a strong candidate to make it 3 straight seasons. Leonard Fournette is next, and he's a hard player to rank due to his sky-high ceiling and rock-bottom floor. We've seen what he can do when he's on the field, as he was the number 9 running back with 13 games played in 2017. Last season was a different story, though, as Fournette was the number 40 running back with just 8 games played. Fournette is in a better offensive situation and definitely has top 10 upside now that Nick Foles is quarterback, but he needs to stay on the field in order to remain a high-end option. Next up is Amari Cooper, who was the number 9 wide receiver in fantasy football from Week 9 to the end of the season after joining the Cowboys. Cooper is dealing with a foot injury right now, but it's not expected to make him miss any regular season games. This is the same injury he suffered as a rookie, which didn't prevent him from missing any games, as he went on to be the number 21 receiver. Cooper is a fringe top 10 option at wide receiver. Next up is Todd Gurley, who still finds himself inside my top 15 running backs, but isn't someone I'm looking to draft in 2019. It's much easier to lose a draft in the first few rounds than it is to win it, and Gurley's situation is one that can ruin his value. The Rams have said that they're putting Gurley on the veteran plan, which includes missing practices throughout the season and having a significantly reduced workload, while other running backs on the team handle approximately 35% of the snaps and touches. A reduced workload and knee arthritis are enough to scare me away from drafting Todd Gurley in the first 2 rounds. Number 29 is my favorite breakout player in 2019, Chris Godwin. I went in-depth on Chris Godwin on my last video, so I'll just summarize here. Godwin is in a pass-first offense with quarterback Jameis Winston and head coach Bruce Arians. About 29% of the team's targets from last year are up for grabs after the departures of Deshaun Jackson and Adam Humphries. Bruce Arians loves Chris Godwin and has said that Godwin won't come off the field, he'll catch 100 passes, and will play the Larry Fitzgerald role in the offense. In Arians' last 3 seasons coaching the Cardinals, Larry Fitzgerald was the number 4 fantasy receiver in 2017, the number 11 receiver in 2016, and the number 7 receiver in 2015. I'm all in on Chris Godwin in 2019. The last player on this list is Chris Carson, who's in an excellent situation in 2019. Carson, who was last year's number 15 running back, is in the most run-heavy offense in the NFL, which may even look to run the ball more now that Doug Baldwin retired. Carson is also looking to have an increased role in the passing game, as the Seahawks offensive coordinator has gone on record saying that Carson should get about 50 targets this season, which is more than double what he saw last year. Rashad Penny's presence doesn't scare me away from Chris Carson because Carson has thrived so far in camp while Penny has not looked sharp at all. The starting job is all Chris Carson's. Well, there you have it, everybody. Those are my top 30 overall players for the 2019 fantasy football season. Please like the video if you enjoyed it or learned something. It would really mean the world to me. I did a lot of research for this video. If you have any questions or thoughts that you want to share, be sure to comment down below and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching, and be sure to have yourself a good one.